What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Meko, joined by my guy Morgan here. And Morgan, we are here to have a really good conversation about one of the best units on this Detroit Lions roster. We're going to talk about running backs. Last week that we were here, we actually had Ryan join us, and we got to talk about offensive line in one video, and we had another video where we got to talk defensive line. I think this is going to be a really good conversation because we get to go back to the offensive side, and we get to talk about two of the most dynamic players specifically on this Lions roster. And we'll get to talk a little bit about possibly Sione Vaki and Craig Reynolds as well. But I don't know about you, but this is a group that I'm very, very optimistic about going into 2024. And, we're going to get into where PFF technically ranks the units as well as the players individually. But I think this is going to be a really good conversation.
Yeah, it's an interesting talking point because it's kind of like a throwback, right? Like a lot of things about this Lions roster and franchise are very modern, but the fact that like so much of the Lions' success is based off of their elite offensive line, and then these dudes who they invested quite a bit in the top two dogs, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, won a nice little free agent deal, that gave David Montgomery some guaranteed money, and that's what running backs look for in this day and age on a second contract. Like he's a success story coming out of Iowa State, and then you have Jahmyr, who was the Lions' first pick in 2023. And a lot of people were, including me, I was like, oh my God, like he's nice, but is he that nice? And the answer was yes, a resounding yes, bro, right?
I was going to say resounding yes. It was going back to Jahmyr being drafted. It was one of the most confusing nights for me as a Lions fan because I'm sure much like you as well, like I love Jahmyr as a prospect. I was all in on the Lions potentially taking him if they wanted to. But like a lot of people, I just didn't think he would be their first pick. Maybe their second pick in the first round, but definitely probably like their first pick in the second round if he was still around. And so for the Lions to get such a dynamic running back and to pair him up, like you said, with a great savvy veteran in David Montgomery, a young David Montgomery too. It wasn't like, David Montgomery is like in his early 30s or anything like that. Like David Montgomery still has a lot of tread on the tires. And he definitely showed that off this past season. So that's a really good jumping off point. And I want to kind of use that to springboard us into this conversation. So if we look at PFF's rankings of the running back groups across the NFL, the Lions come in at third, Morgan, on this list. Before we get into some of the other questions I have, what do you think about the Lions being third best running back group in the NFL? Is it too high? Is it too low? What's your feeling on it?
I'm fine with it. Like top three, I think was a shoe-in because I think it's the Niners, Dolphins, and Lions, like in that tier. In terms of having the best backs in football. And then it's like after that, I think there's a little bit of space and then so on and so forth. So I'm cool with it. I think there's an argument to be made that they should be second just because I think Montgomery and Gibbs gives you a little bit more of like flexibility than like Mostert and A-Chain. And so, it's splitting hairs there. And then I'm not going to argue with the Niners being one just because of McCaffrey and how elite he's been lately, man. Like these last like 3 or 4 years, right? Like a lot of people were looking at Kyle Shanahan like, what are you doing? When he made the move for McCaffrey, and he knew what he was doing, man. This is like tailor-made perfect fit for Shanahan and what he does. I think back to like Terrell Davis, you know what I mean? Like that's some of the running game that I grew up watching. And that was under Shanahan's dad at the time, wasn't it? It was under Mike.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So that's what I think of when I'm watching McCaffrey, and they got Trent Williams moving in space, and they're just beating people up. So similar to what the Lions do with Panay and Frank Ragnow. So I don't have any complaints about it. What about you, though?
I have a couple complaints. I'm gonna be a little bit meaner than you in this instance because I do think there's an argument for the Lions to be number one on this list. To be completely honest, I think two is like bare minimum of what they should be. And it goes back to what you're saying about David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs just giving you a little bit more as a duo, right? It's not just that like one player is carrying the bulk of the carries and doing the bulk of the damage. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs in tandem just wore opposing defenses out, right? Obviously, David Montgomery was the one that went over 1,000 yards. Ja was right there though with like over 900 yards, so it's not like he was far off. When I look at the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins probably have a better argument to be second than honestly the 49ers do, in all honesty, because the same thing that I just said about the Lions with Gibbs and Monty. Mostert and A-Chain are amazing, and they were dynamic. And obviously A-Chain had a couple injuries, and they missed him a bit, but that's when Raheem Mostert got to carry the bulk of the load. But between that offense, or among that offense, like, it was absolutely a two-headed monster that kept things kind of moving. When I look at the 49ers, Christian McCaffrey is everything that you just said he is. He is absolutely fantastic, and he is absolutely the motor that helps that running game go. But everything else I look at is a lot of emphasis on the offensive line. It's a lot of the scheme. It's a lot of play calling that allows that offensive, or at least their run game, to be so dynamic. So it is very good, and it probably is one of the top 3 best run offenses in the NFL. But if we're talking about running back groups, well, I think the Lions should just be a little bit higher on this list. Also looking at the San Francisco 49ers, yes, Christian McCaffrey, if we were to go look at the individual like player rankings that PFF has, Christian McCaffrey is number 1, as he should be. Like, again, going back to everything that you said about him, he's dynamic as a runner. He's dynamic in the pass game. He does everything you need him to do. But Elijah Mitchell, who is their RB2, is not even in the top 32, right? Like, he's not even listed amongst that number. The Lions have Jahmyr, Gibbs, and David Montgomery on that list. Ja coming in at number 9, and David Montgomery much lower than he should be at 23, but you still have 2 of the top 30 running backs in your offense. I don't see how that doesn't get you a little bit higher on this list, and again, getting you that number 1 spot.
I think that's all valid, for real. I like the way you're looking at that, because it's tough for me sometimes in these exercises to remove like the context around the running backs. So like before we got on and I was looking at this, I was like, oh, okay, the Niners, Dolphins, and Lions all have good offensive lines, and they all have really good play callers too, and Shanahan, McDaniel, and then obviously Ben Johnson. But then I'm like, shake that out. We're just looking at personnel here. And from your vantage point, that's 100% true, because like you said, there's 2. I would argue that Jahmyr and Montgomery are both top 20 running backs. If this list were a little, we're going to talk about that in a second, but I would say they're both top 20, with Jahmyr being closer to the top. I have a point to make about Jahmyr too. We'll get to that, but yeah, I do agree with you, because you can definitely argue from a purely a personnel standpoint that the Lions could be 1 and at least 2. So I get that.
Yeah. So before we switch gears a little too much, like, looking at the rest of this list, I think we can both kind of agree. Maybe the Lions at 3 is solid. Is there any other team on this list that you're like, man, they were a little bit lower than I thought they would be?
It pains me to say, because of how goofy their fans were after the Lions beat them in the playoffs, but man, the Rams could be really good. I'm not sure. We'll see how their offensive line shakes out. They've had some changes there. Just, they brought in Jonah Jackson, obviously, but Kyron Williams, and then you add Blake Corum. And listen, guys, like, neither of us are huge Michigan fans. Are you, Nico?
No.
Okay, yeah, me neither. Like, we're not Michigan slappies here on this YouTube channel. So, yeah, I just think Blake Corum fits in that offense. Sean McVay is going to know how to use him, and then you get Matthew Stafford, and no, we're not talking about that though. But if you get Stafford into play action, but yeah, I think the Rams could be a bit higher. That's probably my pick, where I'd be like, oh, that's a little low. What about you?
Yeah, actually, that's exactly where I was going to go as well. I like what Kyron Williams did in his rookie season as well, or not his rookie season, but in this most recent season, and getting a rookie in Blake Corum, who is going to be just as stout and dynamic in that run game. I think does give them a really good 1-2 punch with 2 guys that can run in between the tackles, that can really, lean on opposing defenses, and kind of going that same direction we're going, make things easy for the rest of that passing game, making life easy for Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp and the rest of those receivers there. So I think that's a group that, is a little bit lower than I thought. But I think they have a lot of potential to climb higher on this list.
Yeah, and I would imagine they're going to be higher once the season ends. Another team I have that's a little, I don't know if they should be ahead of teams like the Colts and like the Eagles even, but they have the Packers at 6.
I was literally going to like, all right, we're on the same
Uh,
wavelength here. Same wavelength
oh,
here.
we do know each other pretty well. We talk a lot of football, but yeah,
Yeah.
like I just don't. Josh Jacobs is a really good player when he's healthy. He did not have a great year last year with Vegas, and yeah, I don't know. And AJ Dillon's been heh. They drafted Marshawn Lloyd, but if Jacobs bounces back, sure, maybe they're going to be pretty good. But 6 is high, man. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I'm right there with you. I like Josh Jacobs a lot, but I don't think he gives the Packers what Aaron Jones gave them. And I think what Aaron Jones gave the Packers is what made AJ Dillon work so well. I think with Josh Jacobs, you're getting two versions of AJ Dillon. Just one has bigger quads than the other one. Like
Yeah,
I
good
think
point.
they both operate best running in between the tackles, in that type of run style. Whereas when the Packers had Aaron Jones was a threat to catch the ball. He was they could flex him out. They could put him and Dillon in the backfield together, and you didn't quite know what they were going to do. I don't see that same type of versatility with Josh Jacobs and Aaron and AJ Dillon. I think you are getting just carbon copies of the same type of running back.
Yeah, there's not a lot of variability to their games, right? Like I completely agree. Healthy Aaron Jones, man, was a really good player. Like you almost put Aaron Jones in that like category of like remember when Matt Forte was on the Bears all those years?
Yeah,
And like he was a dog, bro. Like in every facet of the game, like catching the ball out of the backfield, between the tackles, outside the tackle. And you're just thinking like, dude, will you get the heck out of this division? Please leave us alone. Like
yeah.
go away. And I wish Aaron Jones would have got out of the division. But yeah, I agree. Like it's the Pack. I mean, we could be wrong. Packers could, start really run the ball really well, but I just don't. I don't know. I don't see that.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, right? If the Packers that offense continues to evolve, if Jordan Love continues to take steps forward, it will make life easier for the likes of Josh Jacobs and AJ Dillon, and they will have,
Sure.
teams will have to honor the passing game a little bit more, which is going to lighten those boxes and give the running backs a little more room to operate. But again, just looking ahead, yes, 6 is a bit high. I would have probably had them maybe still in the top 10, but just further down. Maybe I would have even not necessarily flip-flopped them in the Rams, but I could see them closer to where the Rams are ranked than where they actually have them at 6.
Yeah, like I put the Rams higher than the Packers just off the rip. And, we haven't even seen Blake Corum tote the rock in an NFL game yet, but I know what Kyron Williams is. And if that offensive line's halfway decent, Blake Corum's going to get yards, man. He's just one of those backs. Like he's built for it.
Yeah.
It's just, he's just one of those guys. Like the way McCaffrey's built. McCaffrey's a unicorn. As a white guy to be built like that. And like he gets thumped, man. And like, I think there's been viral clips of him like showing his body after the game. And you're like, ooh, yeah, but all those guys take punishment, But yeah, he touches the ball like 15, 20 times a game. So
Yeah. And that goes back to why, again, if we pivot a bit, that's one of the reasons why he's ranked when you look at individual players, is why he's at the top of the list as the number one running back in the NFL right now. Because he's been more durable the last few years, Morgan. He's explosive in the run game, like we said. He's dynamic in the pass game. He allows the 49ers to be so versatile with their offense. I do think when we start looking at the individual position, though, things get a little wonky between where Christian McCaffrey is, and we can agree that absolutely like talent, but the rest of this list individually, it looks like a lot of legacy stuff. It looks like a lot of like, hey, what you've done in the past is why we're going to slot you here, and not a lot of recency. Just really quick, Derrick Henry is number 2 on this list. Jonathan Taylor is number 3. Nick Chubb is number 4, and I think, again, these are all great running backs. These are all good running backs that a lot of teams would rather have than whoever their starting running back is. But then you start to slide down the rest of this list, and Jahmyr Gibbs comes in at 9. Morgan, do you believe that there are, I don't know, even 5 running backs better than Jahmyr Gibbs right now?
Absolutely not. If we're doing this, like he just ranked it. He just ranked them. So like I was like, is he doing it like based off of, I don't really understand, but it just says top 32 ahead of the 2024 season. And if you're looking at it, there's only one running back I would take before Jahmyr, and it's Christian McCaffrey. You're like, if Jahmyr touches the ball 15 times a game and stays relatively healthy this season, he's going to put up monster numbers. I can almost guarantee you That's how strongly I feel about it. And I don't do that kind of thing often if your name's not Penei Sewell or someone like very obvious. But yeah, Derrick Henry, that too, and I really like Derrick Henry, been a big fan for a long time.
Yeah.
That's very high. And then
And I think
Jonathan
Derrick Henry is
Taylor,
going to do
go ahead.
good things in that Baltimore system, right?
Yeah.
If we go back to the running back group list, Baltimore was like number 4 in that list. What they do with their running backs and how they construct their running game, especially with a guy like Lamar Jackson calling the shots, is dynamic. So I do expect Derrick Henry to have a good year. But again, I think Derrick Henry has started to take a couple of steps back a bit in his game just because of the style of runner that he is, the way that defenders have to play him, that he has to get these big hits all the time. That's a bit high, right? Jonathan Taylor, I think, is explosive and has been really good, but dealt with a lot of injuries last year and didn't quite put up the production that we're accustomed to seeing from him. I'm right there with you. I think you give Ja, a heavier workload going into year 2, and I think there's a lot of arguments that could be made for him to be the second, maybe third best running back in the NFL in the 2024 season.
Yeah, because you look at it, right? Like there's maybe two other running backs that I'd put in the discussion with Jahmyr, and it's Bijan in Atlanta, and then Brees Hall for the Jets. And they're both young. They both do it all in terms of catch the ball, run the ball, the whole nine. So I would put them there. But yeah, like they got Saquon and Nick Chubb. Like Nick Chubb is a heck of a running back, man, but he's coming off of that gruesome injury. Like I remember
Mm-hmm.
that was tough. I hope he comes back because I love watching him play, especially in the AFC. That's nice too. Saquon had a very pedestrian year last year. There's a reason. Like, go watch the Hard Knocks right now. The Giants are like, we cannot pay Saquon. Like, we don't have the offensive line. There's more context around it, but you get the point. Like, I
Yeah.
just don't really. They have Aaron Jones at eight in front of Jahmyr, and like Aaron Jones, we just talked about it a few minutes ago. Heck of a player. Was still efficient last year when he was healthy. He was pretty banged up the whole season, though. That's one of the reasons that Green Bay was like, all right, I would not have him in front of Jahmyr Gibbs for 2024. That's for certain, right?
Yeah, and I know you gave a lot of kudos to Brees Hall. Like, I wouldn't have Brees Hall ahead of Jahmyr. Not again when
Yeah.
looking at what they've both respectively done in the NFL. Yes, it's 1 year for Jahmyr, but it was a hell of a year, and it was in every aspect of the game that Jahmyr was a part of where he was dynamic, and it wasn't like fluky stuff. Like, you just saw him do things on the football field that, again, very elite running backs do, and he was doing it in a rookie year where running back is one of those positions where guys don't usually just pop off like that. Like, they kind of struggle. Bijan is somebody that I would put in that same conversation, and I think when it comes down to like Bijan and Ja, it's kind of like what's your flavor, right? Like, what kind of back do you want? And it goes back. It was even that conversation when they were being drafted, right? Like, they were both seen as great running backs, but a lot of people just felt like, oh, well, Bijan was quote unquote the more complete back. He was the more well-rounded running back. And people just thought like, well, if you're a team that's going to draft Jahmyr Gibbs, you're just getting, you know, a third down specialist, a scat back, somebody that you're going to, throw a lot of screens to, a lot of Texas routes, and that's how he's going to do the most of his damage. And every once in a while, he may pop off a big run. And I think you look back on last season, and he showed from the first time that he really got an opportunity once David Montgomery kind of went down with that injury, like, no, I can do it all. I can run between the tackles. I can run to the outside. Yeah, I can be dynamic in the passing game. I can make guys miss. I can, be strong at the point of attack. Like, he showed, I'm just as capable of being a complete running back. So that's, him at 9, which is still, again, being considered a top 10 running back after only 1 year is great praise. But I do think he should be higher on this list. I agree with you there.
Yeah, he's got to be 5.2 yards a carry, man, for 945 yards and 10 touchdowns. And they ramped up, they ramped up his usage and like, I don't think there's going to be a ramp up period here. I don't think they're going to go crazy. I think they're going to be smart with him, but there's not going to be a ramp up period. There's going to be designed, like Ben Johnson's going to walk into any given game and be like, we are going to make sure Jahmyr touches the ball 15 times today because we have to, because it's smart coaching and it's smart football process, right? So that's crazy. I think, and he can do it all. Like we talked about, you can split him out in the slot and he can barbecue a nickel.
Mm-hmm.
He can really do anything. Run between the tackles. He showed that. He's really shifty. the one thing I compare him to with Kamara is their ability to like get like really fluid in the hole and like not really take big shots. Like they almost like slink off guys. It's like a weird art. And if you've played
Yeah,
football, you know what I'm talking about. It's like those guys that can almost go limp when you hit them, and you're like, how did I not bring them down? Like I'm not. It didn't hurt me or anything, but I didn't tackle him, so I don't know.
yeah.
There's a specific art to it, but yeah, I don't. He's got to be higher. The Aaron Jones thing, the Saquon, it's all pretty befuddling to me, especially. Yeah,
Well, and that's not even the most egregious like ranking on this list of a Lions running back, which is the
oh
which
yeah.
is the crazy thing. Like we just spent all this time talking about Jahmyr being at 9. David Montgomery at 23 is just straight up disrespectful, right? Like he's the running back that had over 1,000 yards. He also had, I believe, he also had double digit touchdowns. Like David Montgomery was part of the reason, maybe the number 2 reason, because obviously the number 1 reason is the offensive line. The number 2 reason why Jahmyr Gibbs was able to have the type of season he had, because David Montgomery was wearing defensive lines out. You were not getting a breather when either of these running backs were in. And so for him to be all the way down at 23 is ridiculous, Morgan. Like there's no way that he shouldn't be a top 10 running back.
Oh, that's yeah. That this is pretty bad, and I'm glad we got to Monty because like he toted the rock 219 times in 2023, 1,015 yards and 13 touchdowns, like 4.6 yards a carry, and they didn't run him into the ground. Like he got banged up, but like he showed a bunch of home run ability that I really didn't. I was like, maybe it's there, but I'm like, oh yeah, it's there. Remember that touchdown against the
Chargers
Chargers?
game?
Yeah, when JMO laid the block. But like, I was like, oh Monty. I was like, oh, this is a good game. Oh, it was like one of those plays. You're like, oh snap, he's about to take it, and then he took it to the crib. So that's something I was like, oh, I didn't really know that was like the Shaq meme. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
familiar with your game, even though we were pretty familiar with the game. But yeah, he's more than just a bowling ball in there that can break tackles and wear defenses down. He can make a house call from time to time too. And there's a couple of like let's get right into it, shall we? Like I'm not being a Bears hater. I know if you're a Bears fan watching this channel, you probably think we are. But having DeAndre Swift at 20 above David Montgomery is blatant insanity because Swift just now, yeah, he got 1,000 some yards last year, but that was with the Eagles, which is last year was either the best offensive line, depending on who you asked, or the second best behind the Lions, if you talk to
Yeah.
most people who knew offensive line play. So yeah, he did well against the Eagle or with the Eagles last year because there was a stat out there like he led the NFL in yards before contact, meaning he was getting for down the field quite a bit and not even getting touched. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit easier to operate. Let's see him do that in Chicago because I think Chicago's offensive line is going to be better this year. Is it going to be Philadelphia's with 2 future Hall of Famers and uh, Kelsey and Lane Johnson? No, it's not going to be. I got news for you, right? Like, what are we
Yeah.
doing here?
Yeah.
Come on
No,
now.
I'm right there with you. I mean, having DeAndre Swift above him is a little ridiculous. I think having James Conner above David Montgomery is ridiculous. Isaiah Pacheco, like, and again, not saying that these aren't good running backs. I think James Conner has never been quite as good as he was those early years when he was in with I think it was Pittsburgh, right?
Yep,
But
Pittsburgh.
I don't know. I think David Montgomery just he was a force. He was an absolute driving force to why this running game was successful. Everybody we talk about Jahmyr Gibbs a lot because obviously first round draft pick and making a splash once he got on the field. But David Montgomery was just consistent. Yes, he dealt with some injuries early on that I think he missed a couple games, but when he was available and he was on the field, he was money. He was highly reliable when it came down to getting the first downs. When they got into those, short yardage situations or getting on the goal line, like he did everything that a lot of us fans wanted him to do in a replacement for Jamal Williams and then some. So it wasn't like you were just getting this short yardage back. Like you said, he gave you explosive plays. He put up over 100 yards in multiple games throughout the season. So to be all the way down at 23 maybe they didn't want to give a lot of credence and a lot of credit to the Lions running backs, but that's a little egregious to me.
Yeah, I just it doesn't make any sense. And then you look at other people on this list. Like I like where Connor's at, but like Tony
Yeah,
Pollard
did
is
Tony
above.
Pollard do anything of? Again, I say that, and I'm trying not to be disrespectful, Morgan. I'm trying not to disrespect the quality of play that guys had. But in reality, did Tony Pollard do anything last year that had you like turning heads?
No, pre-injury, he had that brutal that broken leg in the playoffs in
Mm-hmm.
2022, right? So like he still averaged 4 yards an attempt at 220 in 2023. But yeah, like just I don't really see Montgomery showed everything, man. He's a heck of a pass protector too. Like when
Yeah,
he's back there next to Goff, like he's a really good blocker. Understands, like the offensive line loves a guy like David Montgomery because they're like, oh, you're like like a smaller version of one of us. That's how they feel about it. So yeah, at the end of the day, is it a huge slight? No, but I think at the minimum, at like bare minimum, they're both top 20.
yeah.
I put
I
Montgomery in the top 20.
it's one of those things where there's a lot of good running backs in the NFL, right? And whether the running back group should be a little bit higher or these individual players should be a little bit higher, I think it does go to show the immense talent that is across the NFL. And even I can sit here and say, like, while I may look at some of these names and be like, no way, like David Montgomery was more impactful, or this is the case, or that is the case. It does go back to something you said earlier, where there is an entire offense, there is an entire unit built around these players as well that's helping them succeed. And so you kind of get into that hypothetical game of like, okay, well, what would Tony Pollard have done if he was in Detroit, or X player is here, or this, that, the third. But the reality is, I still lean back on the fact that Dave Montgomery's a Detroit Lion, Jahmyr Gibbs is a Detroit Lion, and them with this offensive line, with this coaching staff, with this quarterback and group of receivers and tight ends, are arguably one of the top best like groups in this in this league, right? Both as a running back group and as a running back duo, it's really hard to discredit them. And I don't know, the worst I could do is top 15. They should at least be both be top 15 running backs.
Listen, I'm with it. I love Monty's game. I think he's like a beautiful combination of like a throwback running back and a modern running back too, just because of everything he can do in the passing game as well. And he's shifty. Just like I know we talked about it, but he's way shiftier than I gave him credit for when he first came over from Chicago. Just because I remember this like shorter, like powerfully built little powerhouse of a running back, and I'm like, dang, that's what you want. And he's proven to be pretty durable. Knock on wood.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I just hope that continues. But yeah, you start talking about the running back room too, where we haven't even really talked about like Vaki is there. There's going to be good competition too for those last couple spots with Vaki is going to make the team for a bunch of reasons, but you have Zonovan Knight, you have Craig Reynolds still. There's going to be some competition back there. So I'm excited to see how that plays out too, because that's important. I do think having a reliable third and fourth option is big in this league because we do know how much attrition sets in.
Yeah, these running backs get banged up. They, you know, like we said, David Montgomery missed a couple games, and so Craig Reynolds had to come in there, and then I think that same game Ja got banged up a bit. So I wholeheartedly agree. Having a third and fourth best running back on these rosters is going to be super important, and I think the Lions do have that with, like, again, with good competition with Sione Vaki, with Craig Reynolds, Bam Knight. It's going to be really exciting when training camp kicks off in a couple weeks and really see how that group kind of shakes up, and what the roster ends up looking at the end of the day. But with all that said, that's pretty much going to do it for this video, guys. Let us know what you guys think in the comment section below. What do you think about the Lions running back group as a whole being ranked third according to PFF? And what do you think about the individual players of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery being ranked at 9th and 23rd? Do you think they should be higher? Do you think they're ranked perfectly? Is there anybody else on this list, non-Lions related, that you think should be a little bit higher or should be a little bit lower? Let us know that as well in the comment section below. And like always, if you're looking for new content, if you're looking for more insight into the Detroit Lions, you can always find that over on the Pride of Detroit on the Pride of Detroit website over on the Pride Detroit YouTube channel, you can find unique content that we're making each and every week. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and that'll keep you tuned in and keep you notified whenever we upload new content over here. But with all that said, I'm Meko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you in the next one.